Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome to session 2. Today, let's talk about instructions and modeling. In other words, how do we communicate the goals and procedures of an activity to our students? Keep in mind that this is my opinion and ideas about instructions, but you might have different ideas of how to give effective instructions to students. So I look forward to you sharing that in class. But I think that effective instructions solve 4 tasks. Number 1, students can understand them. Of course, if we give instructions and students do not understand what we say, then the instructions are not effective. So, for me, the most effective instructions are simple, affirmative, and imperative. Simple, they are not too long winded of sentences. Affirmative means that they focus on what students should do and not what they should not do. Psychologically, people just tend to respond better to instructions that are asking them what to do rather than asking them what not to do. The idea is psychological reactance, in which students might have a negative response to when a teacher says, "Okay, don't look at the other person's paper." Instead, you can say something like, "Only look at your own paper." And finally, imperative. In the English language, imperatives or commands often tend to be shorter sentences. So, for example, instead of saying, "You will take this worksheet and complete it," this is a future tense. Instead, in the imperative, "Finish the worksheet." Bam, 3 words. It's simple and it is a basic affirmative command. Second, I think that effective instructions should quickly set up the interaction patterns. What do I mean by interaction patterns? How will students interact with each other in the course of an activity? Will they be working individually, in pairs, in a group, or with the whole class? Whatever instructions you give, this should be very, very clear to students. Some interaction patterns require multiple movements or shifts. For example, in a lot of group presentations, individual or pair work often might combine into group work, which then spreads out into the whole class as you present. Or consider a jigsaw where you have multiple group movements where students are discussing and sharing information. When considering how to instruct an activity, thinking about the shifts and movements among interaction patterns can be very helpful. In general, it creates more interesting and dynamic activities when you can vary interaction patterns, which is why at JIEI we love Think, Pair, Share so gosh darn much. Number 3, effective instructions take minimal time. Of course, if the teacher is explaining too much, the students are not working on anything and less learning might be occurring. So I like to think about this in terms of teach, do, teach. That means when you consider how to instruct a given activity, think about the minimum length of instruction you need for the students to accomplish a task. Rather than conceiving of an activity or a project in its entirety, think about breaking it up into very small chunks. Because what this does, as my friend Brian will now explain,
you are doing things where you give the tiniest bit of instructions you can, and then students have to react or show understanding in some way, then they can get traction on what's going on, and you're building up a discourse with them.
Yeah.
And then, even if the expectations aren't totally clear, because sometimes you have, for example, you might have co-teachers who all behave differently, or the school overall might not be good at setting clear expectations. But if you can have a way of kind of creating the dialogue with students where you build up expectations together, then it will work better, I think.
Building together. I love that.
So basically, if you want to keep students as engaged as possible, it's a lot more effective to have a more rapid back and forth dynamic between a teacher's instruction and a student's action, which is why it can be so important to break up activities into very small instructionable and actionable chunks. Teach, do, teach, do. And finally, I think effective instructions allow the teacher to check for understanding. And a lot of people put up forth the idea of ICQs, or instructional comprehension questions. This often involves very simple a yes/no question. Can you look at your friend's paper? Or perhaps a this or that question. Are you working alone or are you working in pairs? Or perhaps questions that demand simple responses. How many sentences do you need to write? Don't go crazy with the ICQs. Really consider what the crucial information is for students to understand and ask one relevant, pertinent question. More than two, and it becomes overkill. So, check for understanding, but be judicious. In my opinion, there's one ICQ that you should avoid at all costs. Do you understand? I cannot stand this ICQ, and I'm curious if you can guess why. Write it down on your notes. Why is do you understand not a wise ICQ? Finally, we have the idea of modeling. This is a way to demonstrate to students how an activity is supposed to go. There are a lot of different ways to do this. You can share the written instructions on a PPT. You can write the instructions or write an example on the whiteboard. You can do an example with them in person, or in the case of some speaking activities, you can provide a live demonstration. I'd be curious what your favorite type of modeling to use when you instruct an activity. Let me know in your notes. And before I leave you today, let's watch an example of some instructions of an ESL classroom that I found very effective, but also could improve in some ways.
Okay, you need to be in pairs. So Kazu and Michele, if you're a pair. Maria and Jen, if you're a pair. And Aranko and Yohi. Okay, A, B, A, B, A, B. Okay, it's supper time. And you and your partner, you're at home and you're very, very hungry. Okay? A's, can you put up your hand if you're an A? Good. You can see what's in the fridge. Okay? Keep your paper very, very secret. Don't show your partner. Can you see what's in the fridge? What can you see that's in the fridge? Okay, good. And B's, you can see what's in the cupboard. Okay, again, keep it very secret. Don't show your partner. Okay, to the left of your paper, there are some possible recipes. Miriam, what recipes can you see? What possible meal?
I have spaghetti with tomato and meat sauce and 2 fried eggs and chip.
Good. Speaking with your partner, you have to decide on what you're going to eat for supper. Okay? Can you show your piece of paper to your partner? No? Keep it very secret. How will you know what's in the fridge or in the cupboard? What can you do? You have to speak to your partner.
Okay, interesting. So that ICQ fell with some crickets. How do you know what is in the cupboard? Could have been a little bit too complex of an ICQ. How could you simplify that ICQ so that they would be more clear to students?
Off you go.
All right, thank you for tuning in today, and I look forward to discussing this further with you in class. Until then, cheers!